Hi everybody, Nathan Stark from Montana State University here, and today we're going to be talking about something near and dear to my heart, block-based marching band formations. The purpose of this video is primarily for the teaching of the members of the Spirit of the West Marching Band, especially those student leaders that are going to be helping out with setting students in these formations or similar formations all season long. This is part of a multi-video sequence where we're talking about the different formations on the field, how they're developed, how they're designed, and how we can get them to look as good as possible when we get onto the field. And we thought we'd start with block-based forms because they're probably the most common. They're kind of the most easy to construct, easy to understand, and they're probably the most powerful formations that you're going to see when it comes to traditional marching band drill. So I'm going to actually get off of my face here and introduce you to a piece of software called Pyware. And in order to do that, I'm going to share my screen here. There it is. So Pyware is our drill writing software. And what it allows us to do is not only plot every single person on the field for all our formations, it also allows us to visualize those people. And what you're seeing right here is a visualization of Bobcat Stadium here in Montana, and a nice 170 member band all perfectly lined out in what we call a block. And it's obviously why it's a block is because it's got height and width and also all filled in. More specifically, when we start looking at the components of a block, we have the lines. The straight lines that go up and down are called files, and the lines that go side to side are called ranks. And this is a really common idiom that we use, rank and file. And it comes from military style marching, where the soldiers are trained to follow the person in front of them and be in line with their ranks. Now, when it comes to a big formation like this, there's going to be lines in another place too, which are kind of cool once you start to see them, and that is these diagonals that appear. Oops, there's a rail in the way. Where you can see how if somebody was sitting off on the 20-yard line or 15-yard line and they were looking at this block, they would get to see these cool diagonals as well. So there's a lot of lines in these blocks, and that's what makes it tricky to dress appropriately. So let's take a look here. If I remove all the whole block except for one of these ranks, it'll kind of look like this. And the first thing I'm noticing with this rank is that with all the other people gone, it suddenly doesn't seem like a lot of people, and it seems like they're really, really spread out. So typically, when a rank appears outside of the entire block, it's usually filled in with some more people like that. Um, I'm just going to take just a second to talk through how we measure our dots and our spaces on the field. So every yard line, there's a certain number of feet or what we call steps in between. And obviously there's the yard markers there too, right? There's 5 yards every yard line. But what we do is we march 8 steps between each yard line. And that works out pretty well because an 8 to 5 stride, or 8 steps over 5 yards, is a very comfortable size step. It's actually a little bit small compared to normal step size, but it's nice and comfortable. And then the number 8 is actually really good for music because most of the stuff we play in has measures of 4 or groups of 4 in it. So 8 steps is really 2 bars, two measures of 4. So it works really well with music and the step size. And then what we do is we start to get used to how these intervals feel. So here we are, we're at 4 steps apart, and each step is exactly 22.5 inches. And so we're looking at, around 7.5 feet per person, which is if you have a really tall marching band member with a tall plume on top, that might be about the length of them if they laid down on the field. So anyway, a 4-step interval like this one doesn't really look like a front or a rank to me. Normally, what we do in a situation like this is bring in everybody so we're at a 2-step interval, and then you can really see that line side to side. Okay, so let's move on here. So again, we're talking about the big block here, and we had just done ranks side to side. Now we're moving on to files. And this is a file. Now the thing about this, which is a little weird, is, and I'm going to go helicopter here for a second, is that we're still at a 4-step distance front to back, but for whatever reason, that file doesn't look spread out. I mean, it's really easy to see a straight line there, even though the distance is the same as with the rank when it was a 4-step. Now, if I turn it off to the side, you can see how it's the same space. And if I were looking at the file from the end zone, it would look a little bit spread out and not quite as thick of a line as I might want, as my brain might want to make that as we were looking. So there's your files. And then if we take that file, and I think if we take that file and sort of spread it out here, we've got that first diagonal. And then if you're over here, like I said, from the 20-yard line or so, you're going to see that, wow, that would be nice. Straight line that perfectly from the 20-yard line. Same thing here. From this angle, it doesn't really look like it's too spread out. But if you look at it from the front, I mean, yeah, if you get far enough away and high enough up, you can see that straight line. But if you're just sitting in the money seats here, it's almost going to look like a group of people. And yeah, you can kind of see if you know what to look for. So again, when it comes to these diagonals, without the rest of the block there, it's really easy to get these spread out and have them look almost more like individuals on the field than a line. All right, so we're back to this block. Again, we've got our files and our ranks and our diagonals, and these are all at a 4-step spacing. So that's a 4-step interval side to side and a 4-step distance front and back. Okay, now, one thing we can do to help increase the density of those diagonals is just move the block around a little bit. You see what I've done here is I basically just moved the 2nd and the 4th and the 6th and the 8th, etc. rank over 2 steps. Okay? Rank over 2 steps, and look at how that increases the density of this block. It's really, really dense now. And it's also kind of double layered, right? Or this is single layered and this is double layered, because there's really almost like 2 blocks on top of each other now. And the thing that this does is it really emphasizes those diagonals, because now from the front, I'm seeing more diagonals than I really am seeing files. And the ranks are almost, I mean, they're still there, but they just seem so unimportant compared to these other things. Now, we're starting to get a little thick here with the uniforms matching the field and stuff. So I think I did. Oh, I love that. They're all laying down now. Thanks for getting out of the way, guys. So here we have a nice chevron sort of look with the diagonals. And the pitch here is if they're 2 steps over and 4 steps back. So I'm going to go over to the end zone here and look at this. A little bit strange with everybody laying down, but whatever. And they're, oh, that's kind of hard to see. Maybe if I go down lower. They're 4 steps back. So if I'm looking at this from, I guess I wouldn't be if I were an audience member on the turf here, but I don't really see the lines. I don't really see the diagonals. And even if I go a little higher, of course it's hard with everybody laying down like that, it's hard to see that diagonal. But boy, from the front, boom, you can really, really see that because of that density that we've added. Okay, so if we take that, I think I did, yeah. So we're back to the block again. And if I take this block, remember we're at the double block now, sort of crush it down crush, 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 it's really looking like a mess now. I mean, it's perfect, but it's still just like, what is this? You know, what we have here is basically everybody's at a two-step, I guess a pitch of 45 degrees. So it's 2 steps over, 2 steps back on the diagonal. But the blocks that are on top of each other are still at a 4-step spacing. See, there's the block there, this front rank that's on the line and splitting, and there they are, 4 steps back, 4 steps back. Remember, we've kind of doubled the density of this, and then we crushed it down. So there's our ultimate density there, and that's a 2-step. Now this is really, really tight, especially in that block formation. And if we get all of the other markers out of there, there's that same chevron again, but this time at a 45-degree angle. So again, 2 steps over, 2 steps back. There's the diagonals. And the thing that, whoops, I'm going to go under the stadium for a second. The thing that really strikes me about this is that you can see that chevron formation, but it looks really flat. Amazingly flat compared to the 2 steps over and 4 steps back angle that we had before. Now, if we go over to the side here, though, suddenly we're seeing a little bit better of the formation. So it is a bit more pleasing overall from the stadium. And certainly if you get high enough up, this is pretty steep, but if you get high enough up, you can really see it. But for those people that are in those money seats, it's interesting how it almost looks more, that rails in the way, it almost looks more like a rank than the other one did, just because it's hard to see that perspective. All right, so we're moving on from here and back to that full block. This is the original block, 4x4 block, and I haven't moved anything over or overlaid them yet. So I'm back here, and I'm just kind of spreading everybody out now. So now we've got 4 steps front to back, so 4-step distance, and an 8-step interval. And I've done that because of what I'm going to show you next, and I got to get really far back to see this. Okay, so again, we got 8 steps side to side now, 4 steps front to back. Okay, so here's the block messed up. And what I did is I had to do this manually. I can show you kind of how this works on software. Basically, I have to move each one of these X's one at a time, just around a little bit, to get this all off kilter, because the program doesn't want to do it, although people don't seem to have an issue with it so much. So I've only moved people a half a step away. And you can see right away, looking up these files, how messy it looks and how annoying that looks, just to be 1/2 of a step off. Now the thing is, I only move people side to side, so the ranks are still perfectly straight. The diagonals are definitely messed up a little bit, because that one looks pretty good. But I really only move people side to side on this one, but it's still kind of messy. And so what we do is we say, hey, everybody, we need you to cover down. And covering down is a really important skill for anybody who's in marching band to understand. And that basically just means get right behind the person in front of you. And I don't mean like crush it behind them, but just line up. So it looks like this. Oh, isn't that nice? It just kind of goes from, and look at him. Like, oh, look how nice that is. Again, that's only a half a step. Nobody was more than a half step away to have that work out. And then suddenly we're a lot happier. Now I did the same thing here, but this time I moved everybody 1/2 step, not everybody, but I moved people sort of randomly. You see there's a few here. 1/2 a step either front or back, as if their distance wasn't 4 steps, but maybe 3.5 steps, or 4.5 steps or something like that. Now, the cool thing about this is you really don't notice it from the front. The files look pretty straight. Now, if you get high enough, you can start to see some interval things maybe here or there. But they might not be that apparent to you once you do this with real people. And I want to remind you, or not remind, just state this to everybody, that Pieware here has got people that are exactly the same height and exactly the same build. So it makes everything look really, really perfect. And there's no wind. It's always, 70 degrees. um, but in real life, you're going to have people of all different sizes and shapes on the field. And little things like this, an interval thing here or there, is going to be so small compared to the difference in heights, you probably won't even notice it. And that's just something that's really important for everybody to understand, is that from an audience perspective, an error front to back is not nearly as extreme as an error side to side. Having that said, not everybody is here in the money seats. So if we get over here and look at it from the end zone, we can see how those ranks have been all goofed up, okay? Some of them are better than others, as is always the case. And the diagonals, I'm just going to take a quick look. Some diagonals are good. This one's really messed up, and then that one's almost perfect. And that's just, again, half steps up and down on the files. Half steps up and down on the files. Okay, same thing here. A little correction, and boom, we're back. Did you even notice it? A little bit. I bet from this side you're going to notice it. Yay, we're all better. We're all better. Okay, so we've dressed our ranks that way. Now that's going to be pretty hard to do from an 8-step distance. And the reason for that, or an 8-step interval rather, and the reason for that is, when you're looking up, you're basically using your peripheral vision side to side to see if you are in a rank or not. And if you're 2 steps away from somebody, well, that's pretty easy to see. 4 steps, that's a little harder. 8 steps, that's really, really hard. Fortunately, there's things on the field that we can use to kind of get our ranks figured out, right? So there's obviously the hash marks and the front sideline. I didn't do a very good job here with placing them, but there's people that could be kind of near the middle of the number, a little bit on the low side. But there's things you can use on the field to help with that. But yeah, dressing ranks side to side is actually kind of hard, especially when they're this far apart. And so it's a good thing that most of the audience isn't going to notice if there's an error front to back so much, because they're going to be looking at it straight on. Where this applies more, I think, is when it comes to those diagonals. We really want to see those, because I'm not really that far away. I'm here maybe on the 20, certainly inside the 20, and I'm starting to see those diagonals, and that's where I really want to, I get worried about the front-back spacing. All right, let's move on from here. Okay, now what I've done is I've moved people, again, no more than a half a step, either back and forward and side to side. So some people are on their lines but too far back. Some people are on the lines too far forward. Some people are just kind of off diagonally or whatever. So it's kind of a combination of both of those other things. And we have that same sort of jumbled look, okay? We got jumbled look on the files, jumbled look on the ranks. Again, this is only a half a step. Isn't that amazing? It's only a half step. So half a step is not even a foot. 11 inches maybe, a little bit more than that. 11¼ inches. That's it. Now you can really see what's really bad is the diagonals. I mean, it's just like, it just looks like a free-for-all. Except for that one. It's always really good. Good job over there. So what we do first when we dress our block-based forms is we dress the file first. File first. So everybody get behind the person in front of them, cover down, whoop. Now we're assuming that our front people know where they're supposed to be, okay, which is not always a safe assumption, right? But here, let's be kind and assume that everybody knows they're supposed to be on a line, and we dress it cover down. Good. And automatically already we're so much better off. Now, when we look at the, whoa, what happened? We look at the ranks here, they're still pretty messed up. I'm still having a hard time seeing them, some better than others. The diagonals are better. I can actually kind of see where they are. But wow, from the front, holy cow, what a quick fix. That looks pretty darn good. And again, remember, if you got a band of a bunch of different sized people, this is going to be almost not noticeable. Okay, and then from here, we're going to dress front to back, and boom, there we go. Everybody's right where they should be, and we're looking down those ranks, we're looking at those diagonals, and everything is right good. So first is your file, and second is your rank. That's how we're going to be dressing these blocks. Now, it's time to talk about these diagonals, because this is where things get tricky. Okay, again, these are the diagonal at the 4-step interval. Remember how we talked before where it's a little hard to see exactly the spacing there, or the line with the spacing there. So we're gonna add double the density real quick. So now we've got 2 steps over, 2 steps back. It's a 45-degree diagonal right across the cat head there. All right. Now what I have to do is, remember how we talked just a second ago about assuming everybody's in the right place, like the front person is always in the right place. So when you're a part of a diagonal, the thing we have to emphasize for you is that you are the front of your file, and that there's a bunch of people behind you that are counting on you being in the right place. I keep going to the stadium. Counting on you being in the right place. And if you're not that front person in the right place, then your whole file is going to be messed up. And you're forcing people behind you to decide whether they should cover down behind you wrong, or if they should be on their dot, okay, which is always a big argument, right? So that's the thing to emphasize. So everybody's got to understand that when they're in a diagonal, that they're really sort of the front person of an imaginary file that's behind them. And so that the very first thing they have to do when dressing this diagonal is make sure that they are in the right place, that they're covering down in this imaginary diagonal that they're on. And this is a little abstract. There's some folks that are just outstanding with spatial thinking. They can just look at something and be like, oh yeah, that's exactly right. And then there's other folks that just really struggle with this, and they can be brilliant people, but they have a hard time identifying an interval. And so this is something that we have to really emphasize, that this is a 2-step interval, a 2-step spacing, and that what we need, as we were talking earlier about this idea of awareness, like understanding what it feels like to be in a 4-step, what it feels like to be in a 2-step. What we need is all of those people. I keep going over to the stadium. It's driving me nuts. All right. Anyway, we need everybody here knowing how to look at the front sideline and be like, okay, I know what a 2-step is. I know what a 4-step is, so that they can get that file figured out first. Okay. All right. So here's our messed up diagonal, and I'm trying to think, what did I do? What did I do to mess this up here? I'll have to check real quick. I can't remember. Oh yeah, I just messed everybody up. Okay, messed up diagonal. That's what it looks like. So how do we dress diagonals? So there's really 2 ways that we've been told to dress diagonals, and I have a preference, and I'll kind of explain it here in a second. So this is the way that we want to do it here in the Spirit of the West. So the first thing that we're going to do is have everybody find their file, right? We were just talking about this. So 2-step file, it's imaginary, but you got to find it. So obviously, looking at the front, this is too much space. Okay, these people are clumped together. These people are clumped together. There's too much space. This is obviously not right. Okay, same thing here. So if they just say, look, you're a two-step, find it. Boom, there we go. And what a simple thing, only a half a step away. And suddenly, this diagonal is looking a lot better simply because the spacing errors have been corrected. Okay. Now, if you get higher, you can definitely tell there's some issues with the diagonal because it doesn't look great. Although, you know, I've had worse. But we've already corrected things automatically by just like, oh my gosh, I know what my interval is. I know where I'm supposed to be compared to the yard line on this. Okay. And then once we fix it front to back, it just goes right in. Oops, that's not what we did. What I did here, this is kind of a neat feature of Piware, although it's a little bit hard to see with the colors here. But basically, I got this guy here at the top of it, holding up his trombone there a little bit, and I'm going to show you how we dress this. So everybody first finds their file, and then what we do is we got to find our endpoints. So that's obviously 1. Now that person's got an endpoint that's, let's see, is it on the hash? I bet it is. Look at that. Right on the hash. Right on the hash. So that person knows exactly where they are supposed to be. And then this endpoint down here is probably about 8 steps, not 4 steps, in front of the sideline. And that person's going to step it off, and we're going to make sure that this person and this person are exactly in the right place. Okay? And then what we're going to do is we're going to come over and we're going to make sure that this individual here, the second person in line, understands the relationship between them and the person in front of them on the diagonal. Okay? 2 steps over, 2 steps back. Now they may step that out. They may have really good spatial awareness and be able to just sort of sense it. Although I'm a little bit not sure that that's quite as good. But again, they're not going to go 2 steps over, 6 steps back. What they're going to do is they're going to go 2 steps over and 2 steps back from this person. Okay? And then what you're going to do here is you're going to come over to the front of the diagonal. The front of the diagonal. I'll say that again. The front of the diagonal. I cannot tell you how many people shout from the back. And they're like, hey, no, look behind you. The diagonal's this way. It's not. There's one thing you can't do, no matter how good you are at marching, is look behind you. Okay? So, the front of the diagonal, and they're going to get this angle setter figured out here. I'm going to bring this whole screen up. I'm actually going to shrink it a bit. Hopefully you can forgive me a bit on that. And then what I'm going to do, I can kind of do this with the software. So this person's going to find that angle, and there they go. So 2 steps back, 2 steps over, 2 steps back. Okay? And then you're just going to look down the line. You're going to be like, oh no, who is third person in line? You're too far back. Come forward. Oh, not that far. There you go. 4th person, come forward. 5th person looks good. 6th person looks good. 7th person, come back a little bit. All right? Okay, we're still not quite there. Next person, back. And eventually, they should be able to do this without you telling them, right? So I'm going to kind of propel around to the other side here, and I'm looking down this diagonal. Like, I should be able to tell if I'm this person that's kind of messed up here. I should be able to tell that I'm in front of the diagonal and that I need to just move backward. I need to move backward. Now, the key thing is when you're doing this, you don't move side to side. Okay? You don't move side to side to get into your diagonal. Okay? So I'll show you what that looks like. So from the diagonal perspective, it's going to look great. Okay? So this person's just going to move a little bit side to side. This person's going to move side to side. Yeah, no problem. From the diagonal, it looks fine. Okay? Now, I know we haven't fixed everybody yet, so I'll do that real quick for those of you that are objecting to, oh, there goes my screen. I'm just going to do this real fast because I know everybody wants this diagonal to look good. I do too. Might as well since we're here. Okay, there we go. So somehow I still miss some people. Oh, there we go. This is what I spent a lot of time doing. Okay, there it is. All right, now look at that. There's still one person out. Good gravy. Who's that? There we are. Okay. All right. So now everybody is on the diagonal pretty well here. Okay, pretty well. And it looks good from here, but you look at it from the front. Oh no, what happened? We just dressed this, guys. Come on. Well, the reason is that they move side to side on the diagonal, okay? You can't do that. You have to move up and down only. You become a one-dimensional creature that can only move up and down. Like those little spider things on Super Mario Brothers 2. They're just on the vines. They just move up and down. That's all you can do. Move up and down. Don't move side to side on your diagonal. That's really important, okay? So I'm going to try to fix these people, make sure that they're in the right file, etc. It's kind of hard to do with a giant window in front of me, but I got this. Okay, and I don't want to take forever doing this, but it's better. Okay, it's better. We got it fixed up. Okay, so just to review, we've got the file first, then we identify our endpoints. Come over here, you get the angle setter in the right place, and you can do that actually by just lining up the endpoints. But I really like to put some not pressure, not authority, but just some get that angle setter used to being responsible for where he or she needs to be. And then everybody else just learns to move up and down on your diagonal. Oh, person on the 40-yard line, come on. Well, I don't have time to do this perfect, but there we go. You get the idea. There it is. No, it's still messed up. Did I ever do one of these right? There it is. There we go. That's what we want to look like. Yay! All right. Now, you can see how long of a process that is just doing it the first time. But what happens is the more and more you do this, the more people you get trained to do it, the faster it gets, and the more precise things go as we get along. I did want to show you this because this is a downfall of this way of doing it. Okay, so this is what would happen, and it's a perfect diagonal. Look at it, just perfect. Oh my gosh, it's ridiculous. This is what would happen if the angle setter is 1/2 of one step behind where they should be. 1/2 of a step. And what happens is, as we go along, and I left this endpoint right where they should be, right on the hash back there. As we go along, the error gets worse. So this is a half step, this is 1 step, this is 1.5 steps, this is 2 steps, 4 steps, 6 steps, 8 steps, 12 steps, which is nowhere near they need to be. Nowhere near where they need to be. And that's just with a 1/2 step error here. So there is that chance. And the way we sort of build some insurance against that is we come here and we say, okay, well, who else could we really rely on to be a good to be in a good place here? And for whatever reason, I think this person is supposed to be on the hash. So here's a perfect example, right? Somebody could be on the hash splitting. Somebody could be right on the 50-yard line and 4 steps in front of the hash. So what we do is we kind of say, hey, just in case, we're going to make sure that this diagonal, get a little closer here so we can really see. We're going to make sure that this diagonal is in the right place. And then if this diagonal gets messed up, yeah, there might be a break here, but it won't be as bad as having this poor endpoint be 12 steps away from their dot, right? So the other way of dressing diagonals is not something that we're going to do in the Spirit of the West, although it was taught to me when I was in band. And it kind of works. So you remember how earlier when we were doing our file dressing, I'm trying to see if I can figure out where that is here. I think we're a little bit farther out. There we go. When we were doing our file dressing, how easy it was and how simple it was to just cover down. So the idea is, if you take this diagonal here and have everybody face the endpoint, that they can just make a straight line. They can just cover down and boom, it'll be a straight line immediately. And then they rotate back to the front and you get a nice diagonal. Now, the issue I have with that method is that it relies on everybody in the diagonal to know what their distance is supposed to be between them and the person in front of them. And in this case, it's not a distance that makes sense on the step. So it's not 2 steps. It's not 4 steps. It's just short of 3 steps. It's like 3.9 or something like, or I'm sorry, 2.9 steps or 2.8 steps, something like that. And so it really relies on that, because then what happens is they turn front and they're suddenly off of their lines. Or if they do jump on the lines, then suddenly they're out of the diagonal again. And I just don't think that the diagonal dressing is as important as the file dressing. And I know there's no files here, but remember, everybody's in an imaginary file. Everybody's in an imaginary file here. And if they get out of that file from the front, even if, whoops, I kind of got messed up. Even if this diagonal is perfectly straight, from the front, you're going to have those spacing issues that we had before. Okay, because they're not going to be able to identify that weird spacing front to back. So that's why we do this method for dressing diagonals here. All right, I'm going to show you one other thing before we wrap things up. I'm going to go back here to one of our blocks. There we go. Now, I mentioned that the dress point is first with the file, second with the rank, and then third with the diagonal. Now, the reason why the diagonal is third in this case, even though it's a little bit easier to see the diagonal, so if I come back here, for example, and I'm looking down the block, it's pretty easy to see that diagonal as a dress point. But we always emphasize the rank when we're in a block. Notice we don't emphasize the rank so much when we're in the diagonal, is because of that error piece. Remember how I showed you way over here how a little error down here gets a big error back there? Well, if we had that same error here, then the back of the block, you'd actually have lines that were intersecting each other back here. And it makes it impossible. So when you're in a block, you really do have to emphasize the file first, then the rank. Now, the danger here is usually that, and I have to do this real quick while you're watching. The danger here is that sometimes the ranks can get crushed. So I'm going to move this front rank, or the second rank, up 3.5 steps, and maybe the third rank is right where it's supposed to be, and the fourth rank again is crushed 3.5 steps. And the reason they get crushed is that same issue I had with dressing the diagonal like it's a file, is because it's kind of hard to tell front to back what a distance is, what a good distance is. For whatever reason, especially when you're in a football field and you've got lines running up and down, it's just really easy to make that error. And generally when it comes to marching band students, they're going to guess small. If they have to guess what a 4-step is, they're going to guess small. And anybody who's run a parade knows that the students like to clump together. I don't know if it's a security thing or what, but getting them to spread out and get used to a 2-step and get used to a 4-step interval is always a challenge. So there is this danger. Again, file first, and then the ranks, and the ranks are going to look good here. But remember, we moved these, so this distance here is 3.5 steps. This is 4.5 steps, and then you go to look at the diagonal, and they're. I mean, I guess it's there, but if you had many more of those, you can see how the front couple of people are just completely messed up. They're completely messed up, and so that is one of the big issues, right? When we start getting to making these decisions on how we're going to resolve this. even though I know there's a chance the diagonals will get messed up, I'm still going to ask students to address their ranks just because I know that they're not going to run into each other in the back. I know that the errors aren't going to get worse as they go along. And I know that there's people who want those diagonals to be perfect, and we can continue to work on it. But it's always a matter of getting better. It's always a matter of making progress, making things cleaner, removing errors, and becoming more consistent as we go along. And chances are we can fix the rank pretty easily, which will fix the diagonals as well. There's tools on the field. There's things that we can use. I mentioned the numbers, the tops of the numbers, bottom of the numbers, obviously the hashes, obviously the front sideline. So there's things that we can do to help train the students, help train the members to know where to stand, and also to learn what those intervals are, in the hopes that we eventually get this looking perfect. Now, what I will say is, if you are trying to dress your ranks and you have the time, you can use diagonals very effectively for this. So if you imagine this whole block like a bunch of diagonals, and you imagine this front line as the endpoint and the second line as the angle setter, then if you just get this second line in the right place, you can go through and say, all right, first line, second line are right, everybody dress your diagonals. And as long as they are moving up and down on those files, it will pop right into place. All right, let's review here for a second. I've got this up on a PowerPoint. So, talking about block-based forms, okay? Files, ranks, and diagonals. Those are the three components of block-based forms. Features of block-based forms. They're common, they're powerful, they're pleasing to look at. They're easy to make, and I mean they're easy to make on drill coordinates. They're not necessarily easy to dress, right? They're almost always on the step, right? Every single diagonal we looked at today and countless more are on the step, which means that nobody's got a 0.5 or 0.25 step to worry about. It's always exactly on the grid. And chances are the vast majority of diagonals and blocks and stuff are going to be on the step. They're also easy to see from the audience. Audience members can always tell if your lines are straight. Somebody's always looking down one line and can say, oh, that's straight, that's not straight. Dress points. First dress is your file, second dress is your rank, and your third dress is your diagonal. Remember, if you can get the endpoint and the angle setter right, then you can move to the diagonal and everything should work just great as you get going. Dressing diagonals. Okay, step one, everybody find their file. Find your file, best you possibly can. Okay, if it's a two-step interval, find that two-step. Okay, endpoints, find their dots. Exactly where you're supposed to be. Step it off, count it off. Use a stick. Dig your toe into the field, make a dot. No, don't really do that. Know where you're supposed to be. Then that angle setter's got to figure out where they're supposed to be in relationship to that first endpoint. And then you dress the diagonal by moving people up and down on the file. Exercises. These are things that you can do to emphasize block-based forms. First thing is, make sure everybody's got a good step size. Everybody can step 22.5 inches, 8 to 5 stride. And we do blind marching here, so we take some like safety goggles and spray paint the insides, and they have to march from line to line, practicing that 22.5 inch step size, 8 to 5 stride exactly, so they can do it without drifting side to side or being too big or too little. Awareness, two-step and four-step awareness, being able to feel that two-step, feel that four-step, whether it's front to back or side to side, right? Get used to those intervals because you're going to use them a lot. When you're dressing ranks, practice covering down. Files. Practice covering down. When you're dressing ranks, it's all about your peripheral vision, right? Side to side. Can you look straight forward and see the individuals side to side of you? If you can't see them, you're probably in front of your rank. If you can see them really well, if you can see the back of their heads, you're probably behind your rank. So practice doing that. Practice dressing without having to physically look side to side, but using your peripheral vision. And then, of course, practice this process of dressing diagonals so it gets really automatic. All right, so we got a couple of points of confusion that apply to this a little bit. The first thing is misinformation, and this is going to be the very first thing all the time, right? People telling other people stuff that's wrong. You're supposed to be here. You're not supposed to be there. Line up here. Look behind you. Blah, 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 blah. Okay, so we really want to avoid giving information that's incorrect. It would be better to either say, I don't know, or honestly, just don't say anything. Do your best to line up, and if things change, it changes. If you're away from your dot, you're away from your dot, okay? Do your best there to avoid misinformation, avoid giving it, and avoid being it, all right? 2 steps is not 1 yard. This happens a lot. Students look at the hash marks on the front of the field and they think, oh, that's about 2 steps. No, hash mark is 30 inches. I'm sorry, 36 inches, duh. 36 inches, okay? 2 steps is 45 inches. So 36, 45, that's a difference of 9 inches. It's a half a step away. Okay, so 2 steps is not 1 yard. First step of 8 to 5 stride is too large. This is really, really common. I mentioned that 8 to 5 stride is a comfortable step, but slightly smaller than most people take. So as you would expect, the first step tends to be too large, and then the next 7, or especially the last step, is slightly smaller in order to hit the line after 8 steps. So that's something to watch out for. Again, points of confusion. Stay on your imaginary file. Feeling like you're part of this file that actually doesn't exist is a little bit cerebral and imaginary, but getting used to it really, really helps. And remember, you're a 2-dimensional creature moving up and down on your vine, and that's the way to think about it. Watch out for crushing distances, crushing your file. So actually, I probably should have written crushing your ranks, but remember we talked about that big block where 4 steps is sometimes gets 3.5 steps, and the next thing you know, things are getting crushed a little bit. So watch out for that. Generally, when it comes to measuring distance front to back, we estimate small. That's just a tendency, unless you're trying to compensate, and then you estimate big. Really just want to know where 4 steps is and get really used to that. Remember, we've got a band of different people with different thicknesses and different heights and different body shapes. And so just be aware that nothing is going to be perfect. It's just not going to be perfect. And I give you a perfect, not perfect. No, I can give you an example of this. So on our uniforms, we've got that cat head kind of right on the chest. And that cat head, and especially the white diagonal or triangle shape, is sort of that dot. Like if you look at our marching members from far away, that white dot is kind of the thing everybody sees. Now, if you've got people of different heights and they're all standing right next to each other, like at a 2-step rank or in a company front or something like that, then that little dot is going to, it's going to be more like a mountainscape than it is a straight line. It's not going to be a horizon on the ocean. It's going to be more like what we have here with the mountains. And that's simply because no matter how, the height of people are going to change where that white speck is from the observer standpoint. And if we wanted those dots to line up, those white dots to line up, what we would do is we would have the shorter people actually behind the front, stand a little bit behind the front, so that in their perspective, those white dots would all be straight across. Now, obviously, that would be really hard to do. It would be as hard to do that as it would be to line everybody up by height. All right. So there's always going to be the human issue, the human error. But that's something to celebrate, not something to shy away from. I could make a perfect looking block on Pieware, but it's boring, right? As all of you can attest to after watching this for 45 minutes. So we try to make it better. We try to know our tendencies, but ultimately it's go out there and perform and do your best. And then, of course, the last thing we always talk about is dot versus form. Who's right, who's wrong, and how to resolve that. The best thing to understand is we're all in this together. We're all working together. It's not about being right. It's not about being wrong. It's about getting better. Ultimately, when the audience looks at a formation, they want to see the formation. They don't want to see a bunch of people in the right place, right? Having that said, there's some folks that have to hit their dot. If you are an angle setter, or especially if you're an endpoint, you have to hit that dot. If you're the dress point for a rank, if you're dressing center, or if you know that you're on, whatever, this yellow word or something that's on the field, and that's your spot, like you can be that person that hits their dot, and everybody dresses to them. But it's not just a matter of, everybody hits their dot, everything's going to be perfect. Obviously, yes, that's true. But it doesn't mean that much if we can't work together to make the formations look right. I believe that in the long term, knowing how to make a diagonal, knowing how to make a rank, how to make a file is going to be much more useful than knowing how to hit a dot all the time. It starts with the dots, but ultimately the form has got to look great. And I understand it's a very charged thing. So it's really about sharing and understanding the goal is to look great in general, is the way to talk about this. So that ends our discussion about block-based forms. Hope you found it riveting. The next thing we'll be going over is circle-based forms. Thanks for watching, and I hope this information was helpful.